All right, welcome everybody to the last developer hour of 2023. Um, just for maybe those who are the first time here, this is an event that we run each month. My name is Nick Diego, and I'm a developer advocate sponsored by Automatic to work on WordPress and do educational content like this. And I'm joined today by my colleagues, Justin Tallick and Ryan Melcher. I'll let them both introduce themselves.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Justin Tadlock, developer advocate with Automatic, like my colleagues here. Um, so I'm hoping today we'll learn some fun things about WP scripts, especially on both the plugin and theme side of things.
Cool. Hi, Justin. My name is Ryan Welcher. I'm an also developer advocate. You might be sensing a theme, sponsored by Automatic. I have been a developer for a long time. And yeah, I focus on block development mostly, but yeah, I'm just here to hang out and chat about scripts.
Great, awesome. So quickly looking at our poll here, we have a nice distribution of people that have used WP scripts before, used packages like the create block package, and those who haven't. So it's actually perfect because we're going to kind of cover the spectrum of just getting started with WP scripts and then kind of towards the end get into some more advanced implementations. But we also have a spectrum of expertise here. I will consider myself in the low end of expertise, kind of the basics of WP scripts. And then we're also can cover some of the more advanced stuff. So before we begin, like I said, this is our last developer hour of the year. But next year, as we go into 2024, we're going to be doing a ton more of these. And to prepare for next year, we want to hear from all of you who have attended. What did you like? What didn't you like? What was useful? What wasn't? So please stay tuned to the end of the session, and we will be sharing an evaluation form. And we'd love for everyone to fill it out. It will really help us kind of structure the series as we move into 2024 and also make sure that we're presenting content that is the most valuable for you all in the community. The next thing I want to share here is we have a document of resources. As we go through this session, we're going to be sharing a lot of links. And so we have a public Google Doc that just has links to some of the resources that we talked about today. We probably will add more links to that doc later or even throughout this session. So keep an eye on that just so you don't have to copy the links down out of the chat. That's there for you. Couple more just announcements before we dive right in. And this is kind of self-serving for Justin, Ryan, and I. But we've done a lot of work, and the community has done a lot of work in the past few months in improving the developer resources for WordPress, specifically around stuff like WP scripts and other things in that area. And so recently, we launched a redesign of the block editor handbook. I'm going to put a link of that in the chat. And so it's just a redesign, just an aesthetic redesign. But with that, we spent a lot of time and effort trying to improve the getting started section. One of the hardest things about building blocks and building with a block editor is just getting started, learning all the tools, learning how to, build your first block, so on and so forth. So there's still plenty of work to be done, but I strongly encourage folks to recheck out the getting started section if you haven't already. We're going to be referencing a lot of the documentation in that section in today's session. But hopefully it's much better than it was before. And for those that are new to things like WP scripts and the create block package and just setting up Node and setting up a local WordPress environment, hopefully these new resources will be helpful for you. And as we look into 2024, we will continually be enhancing this resource. The second resource for those who are unaware is I want to share the developer blog. The developer blog is something that—
Sorry, Nick, can I just jump in real
yeah.
quick? Looks like there's some people get having issues accessing the Google
All
Doc.
right.
I don't know if it's set up to do or not.
I
Sorry to
just,
interrupt.
yeah, I just updated it. So if you're still on
Oops.
it, refresh your page, the document. It should allow access now.
Perfect. Sorry about that, everyone. I see everybody in there now, so it looks like it's working. Perfect. And the last thing I wanted to share was the developer blog, which is the last link in chat. And this is where we share articles about content like WP scripts, and we'll be sharing some of those as well. So as we move into 2024, we expect to be producing a lot of content. Also, if you want to write for the developer blog, if you're a developer yourself or want to share some content, it's open to anybody. It's not just us. So announcements out of the way. Let's dive into WP scripts. And what the heck is WP scripts? I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Let's see here. Okay, so we're going to be doing this. We're going to be doing a lot of code review in this session. And so we need a local environment. So what you're seeing right here is just a default local install of the 2024 theme in WordPress. So we'll be using this, and then we'll switch screens to Justin a little bit later, and he'll be sharing some of his screen as well. But let's start talking about what WP scripts is. And I think the best thing to do is just ask ChatGPT what it is. Like, why do we even need to write documentation when we can just ask ChatGPT? But in all seriousness, we have over here in the block editor handbook, we have under getting started block development environment, we have get started with WP scripts. And this will give you a really nice overview of what it is. So the WP scripts is a package. It is a set of configuration files and scripts that really help you simplify the development process with WordPress. And what do we mean by that? Well, a lot of WordPress now, especially when you're building for the block editor, requires JavaScript or React and JSS syntax and things like Sass. And all that needs to be compiled or transpiled or compiled, I always get these terms wrong, into just vanilla JavaScript that can be used in the browser. So when you're trying to build a block or you're trying to build a block extension, you need a build process to manage that. And I, for one, started out way back when, before WP scripts was created, trying to build my own build process. And I didn't know what I was doing. And the WP scripts package simplifies everything for you. Justin or Ryan, do you want to share anything about your experience with the WP scripts and how you use it in your own processes?
Yeah. So for me, I tend to lean more toward theme development. I do some plugin and block stuff, but my passion is around themes. So for me, like one of the hardest things is just having a build process at all. Like I've spent many years bouncing from Gulp to Grunt to Laravel mix and everything in between, even trying to create my own custom thing, and it's always a pain. I always kind of wish there was like this like native WordPress way of doing things. And so for me, like just being able to do simple things like I just need this Sass, turned into CSS and put in this one folder over here, or like this simple JavaScript. And that's often the case, like just for theme development. And I've been so happy since I've moved. I don't have to think, too much about configuring things too much once I had that like initial, configuration in place. And we'll cover that a bit when I'm sharing later. So
Yeah.
For
Anything you want to
me,
add?
yeah, I use it every day, like every single day. I use it for something. I love, and these are just some of the features that I love about it. I love the fact that it comes bundled with all my linting stuff. So I have VS Code set up. I add one line to my package JSON, and it auto formats all my JavaScript for me. Used to be I had to remember where to put white spaces and line breaks and things. I don't have to remember that anymore. I love that it does automatic block detection, which is so nice. Also, all the testing stuff that it comes with, like end-to-end testing with Playwright and all that, it comes baked in. So you just have to write some tests, and it'll find them and run them for you. I like it. I like extending it to be able to use blocks, and there's lots of things. It's a no-brainer for me as far as the workflow is concerned, because the last thing that I want to do is when I'm building project is want to have to fart around with fighting with the build process to be able to do a thing. And I just find it so easy and quick, and it's built for WordPress. So it does everything that I wanted to do in the WordPress way.
Absolutely. And I
that's my
think
pitch.
awesome. And I think that if you don't know what a build process is, and you don't if you haven't worked with React or whatever, a lot of what we just talked about might be foreign to you. But what we're going to do now is just dive into using it, and hopefully everything that we've just talked about in the last few minutes becomes clear once you see an example, because Ryan said it perfectly with like, it basically removes all the setup process and allows you to just focus on what you actually want to build. Rarely do you want to build a build process, set up a build process. You just want to build your block, you build your plugin or whatever. And this just helps you skip forward to doing that work as opposed to all the setup. So we're going to start with the simplest implementation of WP scripts, so you can kind of see how it all works, and then we'll get continually more advanced. So in my local environment, I have, oops, not there. I have two plugins. One is a simple example and one is blocks. Ryan mentioned block detection. We'll actually see that in action. But we'll start with the simple example. So I'm going to switch over to VS Code. And here, just quickly, you can see these two plugins live in the WP content plugins folder of my local WordPress installation. And we're going to look at the simple example, and I have that over here. So the simple example, again, right now we just have a folder and we have a single PHP file that is registering our plugin. We have, and does nothing basically at this point. What I want to do is I want to create a JavaScript file that console logs out a message that says hello world or something. And I want that to be console logged out in the block editor. So the simplest thing possible. Right now, we're not building a block. We're just taking a JavaScript file and queuing it and making it available in the block editor. And we're going to be using W scripts for that. So what I'm going to start is I'm going to do, we need to, if you're new to build processes, one of the first things you're going to need is a package.json file. So if you have any environment, the first thing that you need to do is you need to install Node. And to do that, we can actually go back and we can reference the getting started section. And we have a great article called Node Development Environment, Node.js Development Environment. And this will show you everything you need to do to make sure your computer has Node. And then once you have that, you're good to start going. So I already have Node installed on my machine. So now I can do npm init, and this is going to create a package.json file. So we're going to name the plugin, and I'm just going to, we're going to call it the WP scripts example. Give it a version number, copy our description here. We can just click through the rest of this. All right, so now you can see that we have a package.json file. Now, I did not actually enter into my plugin file, so I put it in the wrong spot, but we'll just move it in here. So now we have our package.json file. Right now, it doesn't do anything. So, but this is what we need to start. The next thing we need to do is we need to install the WP scripts package. So if we go back to get started with WP scripts, we're just gonna, this is a presentation of following the documentation. So as we come down here, we can see that under installation, the first thing we need to do is do npm install at WordPress scripts, and then we're gonna save this as a development dependency. So I'm gonna make sure I'm in the right place. And then we're gonna run that. And if you watch our package.json file, you will see that it gets updated. What this is doing behind the scenes is installing WP scripts. It's also going to install a folder called node modules. And these are all the different things that are needed to make this package run. Now, this seems a little complicated right now, but we haven't done anything other than run a few commands. And so as long as you're kind of following the directions, it's actually quite straightforward. And you can see now that we have dev dependency WP scripts or WordPress/scripts. Now, this section of package.json is where you're going to run scripts. So I can do right down here. Let me make this a little bigger here. If I run npm run test, you can see I only have one script right now. It's gonna spit out error, no test specified, which is what we have here, no test specified. But WP scripts, as the name implies, comes with a bunch of scripts that you can run. And you can see that the basic usage is a start and build script right here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to copy this over. Now, there are a whole bunch of scripts that the package includes, and later we'll talk about more of them, but all we care about right now is start and build. We're just going to paste these here. And right now, this isn't going to do anything because we don't have any files to build. But that's all we're going to need to do with our package.json file right now. Now, the way that WP scripts works is it requires a certain folder structure by default. And you can modify this folder structure if you like. But the default structure is you need a src file or source file, and you need a build file. This build file does not live here. It lives in the root. So we have our source file and our build file. Now the folder. In the source folder, that's where you're going to have all your JavaScript, your Sass files. And what's going to happen is when you do npm runs, actually, we'll see it in action. Let's add a file here. We're going to call it index.js. And I'm going to do, let's see here. I have my snippets here. We're going to do console log. A little console log here. We're going to save. Now, this is in my index.js file. And when I run npm run start, WP scripts is going to take the content in this index.js file and compile it into our build folder. And now you can see that we have a bunch of files in this build folder. The first one is the index.js, and you can see that it has a lot more content in here than in my original source folder file. And then we also get this assets file. And right now, this assets file doesn't have anything in it, but this is where we're going to see our dependencies and our version number. This is a unique key that's added. We'll talk about this more in a section, but just know that we have these two files, and then we have this map file, which we can ignore for right now. But when you run the start, it's going to create this. And watch this. As I do hello test, some more content, and I save this, automatically, as soon as I save this file, my build file gets updated. You can see some more content here. So this is what we talk about when we're talking about a build process. Your content from source is going to get compiled and put into your build folder. And these are the files that you're actually going to use in your plugin, in your finished product. Now, before you had actually used those files in your build folder in your finished product, you are going to run npm run build. This is the final build ready, production ready version of that file. And we're going to do npm run build. It's going to build for you. And now you can see that the build folder, we got rid of that map file. It's not needed anymore. And we just have the index.js file. And we have our assets. Now, we haven't actually enqueued, if you're familiar with JavaScript and WordPress, we haven't enqueued this JavaScript file anywhere. So let's just quickly enqueue that, and then we can actually see that this is actually console logging and everything is working. So we're going to come back over to here, and you enqueue in PHP just like you would normally. But the key here is we're pulling in our asset file. We're using our asset file because you can see that our asset file is giving us our dependencies. We don't have any right now. And it's also giving us our version. So when I'm enqueuing this, I'm using the dependency from the asset file and the version from the asset file when I'm enqueuing my script. Now, this code that I just copied over, this is actually in the documentation. So if you scroll down a little bit, this is exactly the code that's right here. So you can reference that from the file. But now we're going to save. And I'm going to come over to my local site. We'll go to pages. We'll go to that exploring WP scripts page, and then we'll inspect, go to our console, and here we go. Hello, this is a test, some more content. Easy as that. Now, you could have done this without a build process, right? And just console logging out some content. Let's make this a little bit more interesting and import another WordPress package. So it's really common in WordPress to import translation. So instead of this hello test, we have something like this. Here we are translating, hello there, this is a test, using this 2 underscores from the WordPress internationalization package. Let's run npm run start again. Now some interesting things are going to start happening. If we look at our assets file, you can now see that we're actually dependent on wp/i18n. And the build process already knows we were depending on that because we're importing it. It's already adding it there for us. In the index here, we have a lot more stuff's going on, and we're using Webpack. And later, Ryan can explain all this to us. But we're using Webpack to pull in that dependencies. And look at all this extra stuff that we did not have to write, the build process is managing. Now let's close this out and run npm run build. Again, this is going to build. Now let's look at our index file. Look at all this extra JavaScript that's here to make that import work. That is completely handled by the build process. All we needed to do is worry about our source file. We're still console logging out some text, and we're using this translation functionality to translate that text. And we're using the WordPress internationalization package. So this is all you had to worry about, and the build process handled everything else. And to prove that this works, we will just come over here. We'll give it a little refresh. And now you can see, hello there, this is a test. So that is like the simplest example of how WP Scripts works and how you can import a WordPress package, another package, and just how the build process operates. Now, the last thing I want to show you here is a lot of times we do style sheets as well. So let me just really quickly add a style sheet here. We're going to call it index.sass. So now we have a Sass file. And let's do something like this. This isn't going to make a lot of sense, but this is some styles for modifying the look and feel of the editor. So we're going to do npm run start to get our everything running again. And you can see that the index.sass file did not get pulled into the build. That's because we need to import it into our file here. Look like this. Let's see here. And now we're live coding and things broke here. Oh, that's because I gave it the wrong
extension. Yeah.
Yeah, I gave it the wrong extension. I was wondering why that wasn't syntax highlighting. It's because it is Sass, but the extension is .scss. There we go. All right. So now we're running again. Everything is working. Let's close this out. All right. Save this. Am I doing something wrong here, guys? Let's see here. All right, let's see. Because we should be seeing my Sass file.
It's there now.
You got it.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, there it is. Perfect. Okay, cool. So now what we've done is we've taken our Sass, so this is Sass, and we've converted it into CSS, and you can see how it's converted into CSS. Let's come back over here and see what that did. But we haven't actually enqueued our style sheet yet, so let's make sure we do that. This is the same way you'd enqueue any style sheet in WordPress. But again, we're going to use that assets file to pull in the version. Save that. And now we're going to have a green bar at the top. So
there's been a number of questions, Nick, about the differences between run and build, or sorry, start and build, when you would want to use one over the other. I wonder if now is a good time to address that, or we can address it
yeah, absolutely.
whenever.
Do you have I mean, I can answer unless you have some.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So basically, when you're developing, you use start, because start puts Webpack into what's called watch mode. And that's why when you make a change, it automatically retranspiles and builds your files out for you. The good side, the good part about that is that it will create the mapping file for JavaScript, and it makes debugging a lot easier. So you'll be able to track down your errors, as opposed to when you run build, which is the point of build is to make the files as small and obfuscated as possible, so they can live on a server. So you're going to be in start. You're going to be in start mode when you're building, and then when you want to put that code on a server or release a version of a plugin, you're going to want to run build. That's kind of the approach.
And the cool thing here is that when you I'm in start right now. So if I do background color red, as soon as I save this file, it's automatically updating the build. So I can just come right back here to my local environment, refresh, and now we're red. So it's really handy, because when you're building things, you're often making changes, seeing what happened, seeing if it worked, that sort of thing. So when you're building, you always kind of want to be in start. And then when you're kind of done with a certain stage of work, run build. Now I really want to quickly, I know I'm running long here, but I want to show you quickly how to use this in block development, because those who have used the WP create, sorry, not WP, but the create block package. So again, if we come back to our documentation, we have this great get started with create block article here. Create block uses WP scripts. So if you've never built a plugin just using WP scripts, and maybe you use the create block package, you're using WP scripts. But I want to show something that's really neat about WP scripts through the create block package, and that is automatic block detection. So Ryan mentioned this briefly. So now moving over to the block example plugin that I have going on here. And this example here is very simple. I've already set it up for us with a package.json. And you can see here that I have more scripts than just build and start. You can see here that we can lint CSS, lint JavaScript. And this allows us to check for coding standards and that sort of thing. But you can also run packages updates. If you check out the WP scripts documentation, it'll give you all the different scripts that are available in the package. But these are a few of them that are often used when building blocks. Now, one of the things that we can do with our source folder is empty right now. But what we can do is we can actually use a mode of the create block package called the no plugin mode. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to scaffold a block in the source folder without building the plugin itself. So I'm just going to run this command, and basically what we're doing here is we're running create block. We're creating a block called example1. It's a variant dynamic, and we're running it in no plugin mode. And what this will do is this is going to scaffold the block inside of our source folder. Let's just run that. It's going to build out our block for us. And now in our source folder, we can see that we have a folder called example1. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to do that again, and we're going to call it example2. So this plugin is going to be basically a block library plugin with 2 blocks in it. So now we have under source, we have example 1 and 2, and these are just basic blocks. Now, this plugin is powered by WP scripts. Right now, our build folder is empty. So when I run npm run start, it is going to detect that there are 2 blocks in our source folder, and it's going to do that by looking for the block.json file. And in our build folder, we now have example 1 and 2, and we have the build files for both of those blocks. So what we're going to do now is we'll just go back over to our, quickly to note, in the plugin folder, main plugin file, I've already registered these 2 blocks. I did that ahead of time, but you will need to do that to register the block on the server. But now if we come back over to our environment here, we'll refresh. If we go to example, we now have example 1 and 2. So as simple as that, we use the create block package in no plugin mode to create our blocks in the source folder, but then we use WP scripts just out of the box, automatically detecting that we had 2 blocks in that plugin, and it automatically, through the build process, built them, put them in the build folder, got them ready to go, and now you can insert these as you would any other block, and we can see this on the front end as well. So we're not going to get into block development here. We have covered the create block package in previous sessions, which we can link to. But that is how you would, I often get asked, how do you set up like a block library plugin that supports multiple blocks? As simple as that. So I'm going to leave that there for the plugin half, and let's move on to Justin, and we'll talk about themes, and then we'll wrap the whole thing up at the end with some Q&A, and it can answer anything else that people would like answered.
Yeah, thanks for that great intro, Nick. There's so much ground to cover that I don't think we would ever be able to do it all in an hour session. But that should get everyone started pretty well. Let me go ahead and I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully I can figure all this out. All right. There we go. So the first thing I want to point out for everyone is this new project that some members of my team have started working on. Is the block theme examples projects, now officially in the WordPress organization. So we have a repo, and because we're talking about WP scripts today, we actually have an example of a theme with a build process that integrates with WP scripts. There's no like custom code. It's just like the setup. And like if you want to build a theme that uses some of the things we're talking about today, you can just go to this repo and look at the package. You can look at the specific files. We've actually built this. We built this as child themes of 2024. So like the code in each example is just the code you need for that example instead of a full-blown theme. But we can go ahead and look. So package JSON. I've left this really simple. I haven't added all the potential scripts. I just wanted to show, okay, so you have a start and build process, which is mostly like the main 2 scripts that you're going to use. And there's a few dependencies. I won't cover how to add all of these through the command line since we've done a little bit of that already. But I do want to point out, because in theme development, we're often going to have our own custom folders. Like here's where our assets are stored. Here's where the final build is stored. And it often is very different than what you might see in a block plugin. With blocks, you're typically going to use the source folder for your source files and a build folder for your final build. And themes that may be wildly different depending on how your agency is doing things, or if you're distributing themes, it might be completely different. So actually, if you look here on my screen, I have a source directory and an output path defined. So for the source directory, I like to use resources, and for the output path, I like to use a folder called public. And that is, that would be equivalent to your, build source and build folders. And you can define those. You can set those up however you want. That's up to you. As far as themes go, well, WP scripts I don't think was originally built for theme development. It was built for block development. But of course, people like me, other people who who are theme developers, they want to be able to use these cool tools also. And I think probably Ryan is the one who helped me learned a lot of this a few months ago. Like, how can I do this in a theme? I think it was one of our, one-on-one sessions where we were just chatting, and it turns out it's actually not that hard. You do have to create a custom webpack.config.jas file. And like, if you kind of get the basics of that down, it's not, that complicated. The biggest thing is getting your, entry points. I'm not a Webpack pro. I'll tell you that up front. So this is like a lot of trial and error on my part, like hours of just a few lines. So my goal is just like to have something I can copy and paste, and that you can copy and paste. So if you get your entry points for like specific files that you want, like have an editor file, a screen, which is like a front end file, and an editor CSS file. That defining those in your Webpack are pretty important. But there's some other important things. I hate this new thing on GitHub where it pops up the symbols on the right. You do need to import the default config, which is from WordPress itself. That's kind of important, and super important is to include the default config plugins. Also, if you happen to be overriding the plugins property, like I said, feel free to copy and paste this. And this thing keeps popping up on my. I'm gonna quit clicking on the screen. And also an important thing for themes is to include the remove empty scripts plugin. As many of you know, Webpack is actually built for JavaScript. It is not like a CSS thing necessarily. It's not necessarily for style sheets, but we also want it to use. So when you have entry points that are style sheets, what you end up getting in the build process is like these empty JS files, kind of representing those CSS files, and they're basically useless for your project. So adding the remove empty scripts plugin kind of removes those empty files during the build. And I'm happy to answer any questions about Webpack config around that. This is actually the simplest version of a Webpack config I have. I'm trying to move some things on my screen because all right. I actually have a theme called X3PO-ideas. This is like a real world project where I actually put the thing that I just showed you into like practice. And if we look at the Webpack config here, it's going to be a little bit different. There are things that I want to do that's not in there, like the example repository. For example, I usually have a lot of blocks, individual block style sheets, and I wish I have a theme handbook page that describes how to do block style sheets if you're unfamiliar. So please check that out if somebody can link to that.
Yeah, I'll get it.
Yeah. So I also want to build process for my block style sheet. So I wrote a custom function to like grab them all, and they get plugged in, down here as an entry point, like individually. These are just things that I'm doing with my own plugin or my own theme. I'm sorry. And there's also another feature I like to add is I also have assets like fonts, like media, images and so on, that I need to copy over. As far as I know, there's no simple way to copy like other assets from like your build folder to, from your source folder to your build folder. So I use the Webpack copy plugin to do that. And all of these are referenced in the package.json file. You know, all of the additional packages beyond WordPress scripts that you have to kind of use finesse things for themes a little bit. I think plugin authors have a little bit too easy compared to yeah. Um, yeah. So the biggest things, there's no automatic enqueuing of files, JavaScript and CSS files with themes. So we actually have to do that on our own. And Nick showed that with from the plugin viewpoint. And this process is the same with themes. You know, WP-enqueue script, WP-enqueue style, and of course you have asset files that you can reference, and your asset files in this case in the public folder. You can see editor asset, screen asset on the left of my screen. My biggest thing with theme development is I wanted to have a really simple way to, okay, I have these SAS files. I need them converted to CSS. I have this simple JavaScript. I need it, you know, compiled. And I hate build processes. I hate like configuring them. That's like the worst part of development for me. I just want to build a theme. So I encourage you to liberally copy and paste from either of these repos. And that's what I do, just copy and paste as much as possible for that so I can get to actually building the thing I want to build. All right. Do we have any questions that have come up in the chat that I can answer right now?
Yeah, I just want to, so there's a question about seeming kind of complicated. And I think that it's important to stress that, like, if you are building something that doesn't require SAS or doesn't require React or something like that, you don't need to use WP scripts in a theme. It's just there to help you in situations where you need a build process, or you want to configure to do some heavy lifting. So just wanted to make that 100% clear that this is a tool to use, but when it comes to themes, you know, if you're just building a basic block theme, you might not need it. So
yeah, and I'll also stress that the the theme editor handbook is completely uses like vanilla JavaScript, vanilla CSS, and all the examples. So you do not have to know any of this. This is more like if you're getting into more advanced development with themes. Like, here's some tools that you can use. Maybe you want to replace your build process. Or I used Laravel Mix for several years because I felt like it was really simple. And I had another link. I've lost the link. Oh yeah, I remember. I'm going to build I'm adding it to the chat. I'm in the middle of writing a step-by-step guide for all of this, adding to a theme, a build process. It will be in the theme handbook. If you'll click on that documentation ticket, and feel free to leave feedback there on like what you don't understand, and then we can improve that doc before it goes live. All right.
yeah. Right.
Or go ahead, Nick.
No, I just wanted to note that I shared, for those who were not familiar with Webpack, I definitely wasn't. I shared a link to Ryan's article all about Webpack and kind of how Webpack interacts with WordPress packages, which is very insightful if you want to start understanding the foundation of Webpack and then building your own Webpack configurations. WP scripts, again, you don't need to modify the Webpack configurations at all if you're doing something relatively straightforward, like building a custom block or, you know, building a little extension. There are some strong defaults in the WP scripts package that handles that for you. It's just when you want to start doing things like Justin was doing, like, you know, routing different things and different entry and output folders and whatnot, you will need to make some modifications there. But still, WP scripts is doing a lot of heavy lifting, even in those situations. So it's a great tool to use.
If I can add something too, there is a lot of configuration options. I'm sure maybe I'm just restating what Nick just said, but you don't need a custom Webpack to change, you know, the name of the directory. If you don't want to use source, for example, there's a flag that you can add in the advanced settings. It's in the documentation about, like, this is where you should look for my files, and this is where I want my files to be output to. So you can do that without having to have a custom config, which makes life easy. And you can make it, you can configure it to the point where you can pretty much do almost anything you want. It's as soon as you get into, I want to be able to process SVG images, for example. I think it handles that. Let's say you wanted to do something with Tailwind and you wanted Webpack to build your Tailwind CSS files for you. You would need to build that configuration. But a lot of what the sort of the standard use cases of things that you'd want to change, there are usually flags or at least some kind of advanced setup to do that, which is what makes it so powerful without having to override the whole configuration.
Yeah. I'm also aware that we're coming close to time, and then there was one more example we wanted to share, because it's a question that comes up a lot. Is, can I build blocks, register block types from within a theme? All right, so the official stance is blocks should be in plugins, and especially if you're submitting a theme to the WordPress.org theme directory, you absolutely cannot add a block to a theme. But there are situations, like if you're an agency, if you're running your own website and you just want to, or anything where you're really not distributing a theme to many users, there are use cases where you just want to, you either want or need to add a block to a theme. And it turns out, like, I also thank you, Ryan, because I didn't I've never actually tried this until yesterday. And it turns out, like, this, I'm going to say it's simple, but it's simple if you're already familiar with working with WP scripts. I have a branch on the theme that I was just showing, where you can actually check out that branch and see the code, and that's linked in the chat. So actually what I did was go through and finding the right tutorial, and I went through the build your first block tutorial and added the copyright date block to a theme. So we can actually preview that. The copyright date is a great example, and let's just let's add it to the footer template. I'm still getting used to navigating. Okay, it's under patterns. All right, so hopefully my actual block, I'll show you the code momentarily, but we can first, let's just go add before, and we can do copyright date. So that's this block is actually lives within my theme. That's not a plugin. And you can see it, what pops up, it shows it works. And so the process for building a block in a theme, also pretty similar. If you have your WordPress scripts package and everything set up in place, the big thing is in your Webpack config for a theme, you need to pull in this get Webpack entry points function, and you must add them, there if you're doing a lot of anything custom. Oh, scrolling too fast. That saved me a lot of time. Ryan, thank you for that yesterday. And of course,
can we stop real quick right there? Because I just
It-
want to like stress the point here that in this theme, not only are you building a block, but you're also doing all your custom JavaScript, CSS, and everything. So this is
Yeah.
a fantastic example. You're doing all sorts of stuff, including building the block all in one place. So very cool.
Yeah, I mean, you can basically your Webpack config, you can do it however you want. You just tend to have to bring in a few default things from WordPress to, work with the normal WP script stuff. And of course, register your block type. That's also, of course, you use like get theme file path to point to a specific, folder. Everything else is, I mean, it's in the tutorial. Just walk through, add your block JSON, edit. I may have changed a few things, index, and I know I changed the copy, the PHP end of the outputting the date, Nick. I think you
You're fine. It's good.
primarily worked on the tutorial. So yeah, you can absolutely, build blocks within the themes. If I would just point out, yeah, the biggest things are, this get Webpack entry points and, making sure your file path is correct when you're registering your block type on the PHP end. If we look over, like I have in my sidebar, I have a blocks folder. I have like resources blocks, and then the block itself has a folder. So you could add, 20 blocks to a theme if you want to just, organize them how you want. WordPress, the reason, going back, the reason we add this get Webpack entry points is going to make it really easy for WordPress to pick up these block JSONs and like run all the things you needed to run for building your block. So I want to, go ahead and cut that off because I know we got a few minutes left for like questions, and I want to make sure everybody has time to ask them.
Can I just unpack the entry point, get Webpack entry
Oh, yeah,
point
yeah.
thing a little bit?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So, for those who are comfortable and understand how to extend or to do a Webpack setup, you typically wouldn't do a function in there. But what it's doing is you run that function, and then behind the scenes, Webpack or the scripts package using Webpack is scanning your source directory or whatever you've defined as your source directory and looking for those block.json files. So if you were to not include that, it would no longer be able to find those files, and that's why it's so important to be in there. So if you weren't building blocks, you wouldn't need to add that. And just for reference, an entry in Webpack context is a file. What am I looking for? So that's why anyways, that's what an entry is, and that's why it's important to include that that function. So anyways,
That's great.
Yeah, and I wish we had more, like a ton more time because there's so many examples, and we could really dive more deeply into this. And I think we could do some stuff on the developer blog if there are more specific questions. It'd be great to have more tutorials there.
Anton is
Sure, go
asking
ahead.
a question. It returns all block JSON files and the correct output as an object. Are you talking about the function? I believe I'd have to look at the source code, but I believe what it's doing is it's using Node to check for that folder, look for block.json, and then generating a list of entry points for each one. I'm sure there's some other magic that it's doing behind the scenes that's a bit more detailed than that, but you can think of it as like finding the block JSONs and then you using them as an entry point.
Here's a good question. I've lost it. Does WordPress have a tutorial on how to load the Gutenberg editor, I guess the block editor, and the plugin admin, for example, how to load list of all registered blocks for their icons?
Yes. Well, we don't
okay.
have an example, but I know how to do it. So we're getting a bit away from WP scripts for a second, but the so when Justin registered the block on the server and I did register the block on the server, you can get a list of all the blocks that are registered on the server and their icons and their descriptions and whatnot. I might be working on an article that references that to a degree. The one caveat though is that you can register blocks just in the client. And so if you just register a block just in the editor, or depending on how you register a block, sometimes you won't get every block. So there's a more nuance to that, but you can get pretty far. I'm not sure if that answers your question or not, and I'm sure you're looking for a code example, but hopefully I'll have something about that soon.
Yeah, the other thing to keep in mind too is that if you're doing this in a non-block editor or site editor context, you'll have to manually register the blocks.
All the blocks,
yeah. So that's a detail. That's in the weeds. If you look at the storybook example, I think that Gutenberg has, I think if you look at the code in there, I think you can see how that's being done because they have to register all those blocks. Maybe it's block book or whatever that one that. Anyways, there is an example out there. Amor Kumar has a question. I've been using flags like -- webpack sourcedir and output path with the scripts pack command. I'd rather not use a custom webpack config if I don't need to. Is this okay? Any downsides? It is 4,000% okay. That's why the flags exist. No downsides other than you can't configure absolutely everything that you wanted to do, but unless you're in the weeds of having to tell webpack exactly what needs to be done, I think those flags are perfectly fine and I would absolutely use them, and that's why they're there.
And I assume that you're updating your package.json to include those flags. You don't have to write them every time. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely do that. In your scripts, add those flags. Because it just makes life a lot easier. I've done a lot of really tricksy stuff with the scripts package just in my experimentations and stuff. And sometimes it's just easier just to add a flag than it is to try to like mess around with a whole config and then yeah. So.
Exactly.
Right.
So I want to address one thing I think Beth mentioned, just as coming from a personal perspective. Learning the build process stuff is definitely the hardest part for me. It is the hardest part for everybody. Like generally, it's like so, and that's part of the reason why WP scripts exists, even though it can be fairly complicated as well. So just know that you're not alone. Like we all just want to be building our plugins or blocks or whatever. We don't want to be messing with the build process. So hopefully WP scripts can help with that. And I know it's hard for us to get through everything in a session, but please check out the Block Editor Handbook. We are trying to improve the docs, and I think they've come a long way, especially some of those getting started docs to help you going.
Just to add to that, the whole point of this thing is that you don't have to worry about it. It'll just work. So as long as you put your files in the place where it expects those files, everything should just fall together and work. And then you can focus on learning the hard part of React or learning the hard part of post CSS or SAS or whatever it is that you want to do. That's yeah, it's but yeah, I feel you. I've been there. Yeah. First time I ever worked with React and build process, I was like, why would anyone want to do this? And then I loved it. So
is there any way to convert a shortcode to a block? Absolutely. We do have a tutorial on the developer blog. Let me see if I can pull it up. But I think we want to focus some of this migration process here in the next year. Shortcode.
I got it.
Oh, you got it. Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's I kind of consider that a bit of a case study and of a more advanced plugin. Or more advanced like shortcode and block. I think we could do some things that are, toned down a bit, a little simpler, but yeah, you could absolutely do it. I mean, at the end of the day, a shortcode is just returning like some output. And so a block pretty much needs to do the same thing. It's just you have to kind of make it work in the editor. I don't know. Have we done a developer hour session on that? If not, well, maybe we should focus on that for a session, doing short codes, widgets, similar things.
Mhm.
And that's a perfect primer for, I'm going to share the session evaluation here in the chat. And there are some questions about how did we do in this session, but also there's a second section of the evaluation, which asks you what you'd like to see in the future. So if you really want to see a session on converting shortcodes to blocks, great. Please let us know. We try to create things that we think people will like, but there might be something that is really you're struggling with and you'd love to see. And I'm sure other people are in the same position. So if you have time, please fill out the session evaluation. That will help us prepare for next year.
Yeah.
Marco has a question.
Oh.
I just wanted to
Yeah.
So what is the easiest way to export blocks for production? And dits ignore or what? I'm not sure what that means, but I think I can answer the question. Basically, you want to run the build, npm run build, to generate the build production version of your block files. And then what you'll do is you'll deploy. You don't need to deploy anything in your source directory, because the way that the build thing works, it won't even touch that. So you put your build folder and all the rest of your files on a server and wrap it up in a plugin, whatever it is that you want to do. Scripts package actually does have a release. I believe it's got a release. Plugin zip. It's got a plugin zip command that will help you to package up stuff, and it'll package your block as a plugin. And I use that for my advanced query loop plugin. It generates all the files that I need, and and that's it. That's all you have to do. And then you can put it on a server or upload it to the plugin repository or whatever it is. So.
Yeah, exactly. Like when I put my plugins in the repo, it's a bit of a manual process. I just copy the build folder, copy the main plugin file, and copy any other files I need, and that's it. Yeah, I would. One thing I want to mention here, this is a caveat of mine. If you're putting plugins in the repo, as we saw when the build files are built, they're minified. Nobody can tell how it was built. It's just a big block of code. So if you're putting things in the repo or putting things out in the public, while you don't necessarily want to include your source folder in for production, it is really nice to link to it in a GitHub repo or something, because that's going to show people how the thing was built and continue educating our wonderful community. So please always provide your source folder somewhere, GitHub or whatever. Obviously, if you're doing client work, that's not necessary. But if you're building plugins for the public, in the repo, that sort of thing, it's definitely a best practice.
Yeah,
So,
it's I'm pretty sure it's also as required for plugins. I know it's required for themes to actually so on .org. Yeah.
cool.
I do want to say one kind of thing as we're closing up here. Thank you for everyone for joining us today. Like I know it's a holiday week for a lot of folks. Some of you may already be off of work, or some. Very happy to have y'all join us in this kind of final week before the Christmas holiday for most people, or other holidays.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. I think we've reached the end. This recording will be on WordPress TV and also on YouTube. And again, yeah, thanks for everybody for attending. We hope to see you in the new year, and happy holidays.
Hi, everyone.